Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Ferber. I'm the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Architecture Hunter. Today marks the final day of our special webinar week. And I'd like to start by thanking all of our you for being here. It's been an incredible journey, and we are truly grateful for your participation. A special thank you, of course, to our general speakers who have shared such insightful presentations and valuable knowledge with us. At Architecture Hunter, we believe that being an Archi Hunter means constantly learning and sharing knowledge, always seeking inspiration and pushing the conversation forward. And today is a special day because I have the pleasure of introducing someone who has played a key role in making all of this happen. Rafaela Galafasi, architect, editor, and coordinator of Architecture Hunter's editorial team. Um, she will be hosting today's sessions. She and I work together on curating these webinars, as well as the many more to come throughout the year. But beyond that, she has been the driven force behind this project, carefully coordinating every detail and making sure everything runs smoothly. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Rafaela Galafasi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, I'd like to introduce you to Architecture Hunter and our webinar series. Architecture Hunter has always aimed to inspire, inform, and entertain the global architecture community. Now, we take a bigger step by introducing our fourth pillar, education. This week, we launched a series of international webinars, reinforcing our commitment to accessible and relevant discussions. Our core lies in engaging high-quality videos that make architecture visually impactful and easy to understand. As one of the leading global platforms, we not only showcase innovative projects, but also create spaces for dialogue and learning, connecting a global audience. This event marks the beginning of an even bigger initiative, our monthly webinars. So stay tuned to our website and social media channels, where we will frequently announce the topics and speakers for each month. Our goal is to create a continuous program of inspiring discussions featuring experts and thought leaders sharing their knowledge and experiences. This week has been intense and enriching, featuring talks that covered various aspects of architecture and urbanism. Each day, we hosted experts who brought valuable insights into key topics shaping the future of cities and the built environment. Each session is being recorded and will be made available later on our platform. So if you missed any or want to revisit the discussions from previous days, you'll be able to watch them soon. Today, we're hosting the last day of this inspiring week, and we'll delve into a very special topic, disruptive design, breaking paradigms in architecture. Architects and urban planners play a fundamental role in challenging conventions and redefining the way we design and experience spaces. Disruptive design pushes boundaries, questions traditional norms, and opens new possibilities for more innovative, inclusive, and dynamic environments. To deepen this discussion, we have invited Oshin Varughese, Associate of Wallmakers, and Guto Requena, Brazilian architect, who will share their perspectives and experiences on breaking paradigms in architecture. So each speaker will give their presentation, followed by a Q&A session. The most relevant questions will be selected by our team and presented to the speakers at the end of the event. So be sure to participate. We want to make this experience as interactive as possible. Now let's kick off our first session of the day with Oshin Varughese. Oshin earned her bachelor's degree in architecture from the College of Engineering in Trivandrum in 2018. She then joined Wallmakers, where she gained valuable experience before pursuing her master's degree in architecture at IIT Roorkee, which she completed in 2021. Currently an associate at Wallmakers, Oshin has played a key role in the firm's design team, contributing to several notable projects. She has also been actively involved in the workshops and exhibitions organized by Wallmakers in recent years. So please welcome Oshin Varughese.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, am I audible?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just share my screen.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So like the topic that which was given to us was disruptive architecture, and like being wall makers, it is very common that this is the panel topic under which we are generally invited to speak in. So I will like to share three images first before starting with the presentation. So one, this is an aerial view of like one of the contexts of one of our sites. So it's in a place called Kuttikanam or Pyramid. where you can see that this is the general buildings that are being happening it's kind of like a hill station that is situated in Kerala, which is part of India. And this is the building that we designed over there. And the next picture that I would like to show is of Sharjah. And again, this is a view that we have from the hotel that we were staying in when we invited to be part of the Sharjah Architecture Triennial. And again, like you can see that this is the general buildings that are, which you can see for miles ahead in the city. And this is finally what we built as part of our pavilion. And third, the project which I would like to talk about is situated in Angamali, which is again in Kerala. And you can see another aerial view of the city of Angamali, where it's mostly 3 or 4 floored high-rise structures happening with a tin sheet roof on top of, and generally all of these buildings have the tin sheet roof on top. And this is the building that we designed there called the Nisarga Art Hub. When you look at all these pictures, one thing that which I'm sure that you're thinking, like our buildings, the ones we have designed are definitely examples of disruptive architecture, but mostly to the person who's seeing it, it's in form. Like my presentation today, I wish to kind of connect that there is an image in between that is missing, which connects to the context and like why our buildings are disruptive in nature. So coming back to the first project, which is the main topic called as it is an example of disruption of the ecology that is currently there, is what you can see in the context that is generally happening there. And when we come to the second project, it's about the disruption of the climatic conditions, because like you can see like a air conditioning unit on the terrace of each one of these buildings, which means every one of these buildings in this picture is being mechanically air conditioned because of the really high temperature in that area. And we still have not figured out a way in which buildings can happen without this mechanical air conditioning. And third of all, we can see that there is absolutely no connect to the cultural fabric of this place. With like in terms of building, they do not have an identity or they do not have any connection in terms with the cultural fabric or the society that lives in this place. So now I'll go back to the journey of Wallmakers, which started in 2004 by architect Vinod Daniel, who is the principal architect. And the journey started from Orwell Earth Institute, which is in Pondicherry. And what you're seeing here is a Aurum press machine, which actually helps us to take the soil excavated from a site and compress it. And then like with 6% cement added, the soil from the site itself is used to form these blocks, which are used to make buildings. And when you're talking about this material, it's a great material. As you can see here, the embodied energy in comparison to aluminum, which comes around to 6,76,000, and steel of 2,62,000 megajoules per meter cube. In comparison to our mud blocks, which is the like bottommost one that you see, which is just 572 megajoules per meter cube. And when you're talking about carbon emissions also, like compared to an aluminum, which is 71,344, our mud blocks stand at 54 like kilogram of CO2 per meter cube of construction, which is like very minimal amounts. And the journey basically started, with using these mud blocks. And you can see here that this is the St. George Church in Matanzari that was built, where like we use the technique of the Nubian technique of construction, where without any shuttering, using the same CACB, compressed stabilized earth blocks, the entire church is made with a series of vaults and domes with just 4 lengths of steel. If you zoom in enough, you can just see there is 4 beams that is connecting. Other than that, there is no reinforcement in this project or shuttering being used. And this is finally, the kind of form that we were able to achieve using the entire construction is made with CACB blocks. And like there is a, Ted Ando kind of inspired like cross of light also inside, which gives to the ambience. But and then we actually did, quite a few projects with CACB, and fast forward to 2016. That is when the first roadblock kind of hit, because this is a site for a teacher in a place called Pathanamthitta. And this is the, the vision that beholded when, we visited the site, because the site had the like leftover debris soil, which was dumped by all the neighboring plots after they had finished their construction. So then the question came, like, when we have a small plot which is filled with these materials, do we just continue to build with the one material that we know to build with, or while dumping this material into somebody else's property, or is there something else that we can explore with this? So that is when the design kind of takes in, or the material kind of stretches to accommodate like a new material into the palette of design. So you can see here behind that there is a rammed earth wall, which is normally what we used to build with. And in the center, there is a like a wall that we tried with like this debris wall, in which we actually had mesh, and we got this manually pulverized debris filled inside and then plastered. And here also you can see one half of it is still rammed earth. The left-hand side, what you're seeing is the debris wall, which is ultimately mud plastered. And we used waste meter boxes and all of it to, use some other waste materials also, which we found over there. And like moving on, we like 2017, another project came and we actually started seeing that more than finding like good soil on site, it became more common to see like waste being accumulated in nearby areas. And then it made more sense to, like, if we are able to use that material as part of our construction. So this is another project, Chirat, which was again done with the same technique. And here you can see that the building is entirely done with the same technique, but obviously the finish is slightly better, but not really like, as much as we would have liked it to be. And we kind of modify the technique so that there are shutters involved and the debris is poured along with soil. And 5% cement stabilization is added, and it is then used as shutters. And this particular project, you can still see that there are two, 4-6 columns that we had to, do in between, because we were still in that process of R&D and understanding really how much the material can go. And again, another 3 years down the line, like once we were really familiar with this material, we got this project called Shikhara, in which we decided to go for like multi-storied construction with the same technique. But again, you can see that it is a composite structure, like there is columns and beams that are running, but we still managed to use the same technique to make a 3-storied structure. As you can see here, and again, the finish also was starting to get bit better, because our, the team of masons also were getting a better hang of it. And coming to, the first project that I said. So while we have this material on hand, like when we got this particular site, you can see there's a beautiful, hill and valleys. It's a series of things. And this is generally the architecture that is being done over there. So the whole idea for us was like, how do we, like, while gently the process of building is something that, disrupts whatever ecology that is there in a site, how can we like kind of work on our design in such a way that our design is something that like tries maximum not to disrupt the ecology of a site, especially in an eco-sensitive area such as, hills and things. And this is like, one of the main childhood places that, I have visited as a kid, which is called Ooty, which is again in, like Kerala, Tamil Nadu border. You can see it's a hill station, beautiful hills and, views, and it is a great, weekend outing. And this is a photo taken in 2002. And fast forward to 2023, this place is no longer, hill station or a weekend destination. The entire hillside has been covered with buildings where everyone's window looks out into a valley. But then, like, nobody thinks like, like, what is my building doing to, like, to the valley it is situated. So you can see the entire hill is now covered in buildings. So when we were really contemplating about the design of this project, we decided that we wanted to go for a design that would really not stand out in the building. So in fact, our project shouldn't be seen at all. And we again decided to go for a shuttered debris wall technique with with a modified roof, which I'll get to. And that is when we excavated on site, what you can see here are these loose stones which came up, during excavation, surprisingly. So that is where like the whole idea of like, using these as a part of the construction came into the picture. So there was again a new prototype. So you can see architect Vinod Daniel with our, old, like some of our oldest masons, Mr. Johnson and Akku and everybody, who like, so on site, the prototyping started, like how do we use the same stones that we got to, to form a modified version of the same wall that we did before. And you can see that the final result is like that we could actually achieve like, like 2 stories of walls using this new technique that we had developed here on site. And interestingly, in this area, the main cash crop that is grown there, which people use only for temporary construction, is something called as casuarina, like kind of similar to bamboo, but like casuarina is the material that is used. So we actually thought of like treating these casuarinas and then using it so that this is the ledge that we had on site. And like if the building could actually be half immersed into the landscape that there is already without touching it in any sense, and just allow for a small protrusion to happen, through which obviously the trees that are there could cut in, the vegetation could eventually grow. And you can see that finally, like we wanted the, casuarina to really merge so that the building is not even visible, like, 10 meters away from it, you cannot see. But at the same time, the person inside, it has the, has the beautiful views to look at. So that is when this idea of camouflage architecture came into the picture, which is, how do we really make buildings which could be quite big, but to ensure that the building is not something like it can do minimal damage to the ecology it comes in, which is something that conventionally people are not able to solve with buildings. So you can see here the view to the valley is from the building, but the building is pretty much, especially on a foggy day, you cannot, it's pretty much invisible. And like the roof is meant for the, vegetation and landscape to eventually take over so that it becomes part of the landscape. Like the building does not stand out like a building anymore. And now coming to the second thing that which I said earlier, which is the disruption of like the climate, like what do you do when the climatic conditions are not really optimal? And when you're talking about a place like Sharjah, where we got invited to do a pavilion for the SAT Sharjah Architecture Triennial. So the first question was, which really troubled us when we looked into the like entire areas, we couldn't find a single building, not even a single building, no matter how small, how big, which did not use air conditioning to help. There was no passively cooled buildings. So that is at the point where we really decided that was a main focus for this project, because we have to work out techniques where we can find solutions in which the buildings can cool down without use of mechanical conditioning. And like always, we took the sand samples from the site, and as expected, the clay content was not enough, so which meant we would not be able to do our usual mud blocks, which is why we were looking at the other options that is there. That is when this technique of like which was introduced way early in 90s by Michael Reynolds, which is called the tire, like when you ram the tire with unstabilized soil, and then you can use it for construction. And again, this particular area, like the GCC countries, is a place with a lot of tires being wasted. And if you look at the numbers, it's really scary. Like, like more than 6 lakh tires are being produced on a daily basis. And then we had this idea to make a pavilion that would use at least 1,400 tires, which is the number of tires that is wasted in 3 minutes, around the world. And we started with our chain study method to actually like decide the volt by like which we would stabilize. And again, the markers came from the context that was already there, like because the walls of Ramesium, Bamiram, Hassan Fatih's work, all of this is from that like the traditional architecture that was practiced way before in in Egypt and in that region, but nobody practices it anymore. So we wanted to do a contemporary version of the same. And the idea was for the tires to actually like project out to become a volt and ultimately connect and be the pavilion structure, as you can see here. So the advantage that we had here is that we did not have to use any cement inside the tires, because the tire would be like a holding matrix, and we could use the desert soil, which is normally not suitable for construction, into this method without, stabilizing it. And the work started. You can see here architect Vinu with again our mason, and like again the timeline was really strict for us. It was like we had to finish the entire pavilion in 50 days, which seemed like a monumental task. And again with a new team of workers, Pakistani workers who had, whom we have never worked with before. So it involved teaching them what it was. And you can see here the walls were, coming up. This is day 20 into the work. The pace was pretty much slower than what we were expecting. Each of the tires had to be supported, because only when the the entire tire connection happens, we can kind of take down the supports that are there. You can see that the building is slowly shaping up. The tires are projecting slowly out. And that is when we hit the next roadblocks, because we were into pretty much into day 42. And with a team of people whom we had never worked with before, we could understand that the plastering, all of these works were kind of getting short. So that is when the process kind of like we have to intervene into the process to make sure that, like, can we modify it in such a way that, it is simplified for people to do. And this is something that we showed our workers, because it is something I think that we saw on Instagram, YouTube, like long time. So this is a lady who is throwing with, precise, like aim, the cow dung mortar onto the walls. And we showed the same thing to our workers, and we actually got them and motivated them to do this for us in 3 days. And finally, like, to kind of merge the building with the context and also to add to the cooling factor, we put 20 tons of desert sand onto the sides, on both the sides. And this is the final pavilion that you're looking at. And when we measured, we could actually see that there was a 12-degree difference between the outside on peak afternoons, when, outside was burning at 38, 39 degrees centigrade. We could actually reduce the inside to like 12 degrees lesser with this technique, and like of unstabilized cement and tire masonry. And this is actually the first structure of its kind to bring about that kind of temperature difference, which was like a dream come true for us. And you can see that the entire structure is also meant to kind of camouflage in with the surroundings, so that it looks like a small passage. And when you're inside, you see the tires, the tire dome, and feel part of it. And this is again our team, in which, architect like Vinu, Presha, Rakshita, and that is our entire team with which we worked day in and day out for 50 days to make this monumental pavilion happen. So, like, coming to the second point is that the design and materials always have to modify itself to suit the climatic conditions of a place, so that we can achieve passive cooling with this. And now coming to the third and last, but maybe the most important factor is like aren't most of our buildings disrupting, or they're not even paying heed to the cultural fabric when we talk about a place. So here you can see that, like, it's pretty much RCC structures which are coming up in the town of Angamali. And funnily enough, there's a pointy steel cap put on all of them, which I'm sure just adds to the heat, but in a very feeble attempt to match it with the traditional roofs that used to be there in Kerala, but are no longer being practiced. So when we got a project in this site, especially for a client, like both the couple, Mr. Vishnu and Lakshmi, were Carnatic singers, and they actually wanted to do a small residence and a space that celebrates music, for a small crowd, like an informal space. We studied the roof, like, which was there previously in this region, which is the Kerala traditional roof. And you can see it's a beautiful roof, which with overhangs and everything. And naturally, we again found a lot of debris in that area, because again, it's in a urban city location with overlooking a field. And by now we had also received a patent after 7 long years, for our shutter debris wall technique, which I said before. So we were by now ready to push it to the next level, uh, because it's actually got a very good compressive strength of 4.5 MPa. Like what if we actually do the entire structure without any columns, like so that the entire walls are load bearing in nature. And when we studied the roof, which is very like culturally, like which was previously being used, we actually saw that the slope of the roof, which is generally 33 degrees, is very similar to the slope of a open air amphitheater. And since the site didn't have a lot of space, we were thinking, what if we could actually do small cutouts in the roof, which would become like skylights for that open space below. But at the same time, it could also double up as a seating area to be used for informal music sessions, like so that it can it can happen in the same space. And the work started. This is again, you can see our shutter debris walls and all happened. And that is when one more challenge came into our process, which was brought in by the clients, because when they are part of the work that is seen, so they were asking if they can include for an extra studio space to do a small recording and everything. So you can imagine it's a 2,500 square feet project. We had already fit in maximum whatever we could, and then we were kind of perplexed as to how to include this space. And that is when we actually again tried to we were thinking, because by then you can see this is our shutter debris wall construction that is happening, so in which we set the shutters. You can also see that the finish of the walls are way better compared to before. The workers also had gotten really good at like the process of doing it. You can see that the soil goes into this, then 6% cement is added, then the debris is added in parts, uniformly mixed. Water is added in a required proportion depending on the soil type, and then it is poured into the shutter and like correctly compacted, and after a day it is being removed. And this was our technique, and we were very happy with how the walls were shaping up, that we decided to push it one more step. We thought, what if we can actually add a cantilevered slab studio space above the living room, so that so that the wall, it can be supported on the walls and they can still get their sealed recording studio. You can see our structural engineer and architect Daniel and myself all just having these intense discussions on site as to how we can do this, because this decision came in between the construction. And you can see that and this is that particular wall, which is having a port, like a debris wall foundation also, and the wall which is shown in orange. And we had a 3-meter cantilevered studio to one side. And added to that, the extra weight of all the people, like 60 people sitting on the roof also would be partially be taken by these walls. And here during construction, you can see like the studio came out, and finally we successfully managed to like entirely support that studio and the roof and everything onto these walls without any like concrete columns, which was a great achievement in that sense. And culturally, like the clients actually themselves were somebody who really advocated the importance of the Padmasana or lotus position, where you say that if you sit on the floor and eat, it actually helps in your digestion and general health. So we actually didn't have much furniture, and the furniture was kind of incorporated in such a way that it would be like that people would be mostly sitting on the floor informally, and even the guests would be part of. So this is the living room seater and everything. And then we, like during the process of construction, like you can see that waste is not, there's no shortage of waste. And this is a a scrapyard nearby, and we found these discarded racks over there along with a lot of other waste materials. And because we found this in huge quantities, we actually got this idea of like covering the west side openings with this grill, because then the grill could also allow the plants to grow. And that again became a wonderful addition to the elevation of the building. And this is again what you're seeing in the front is something called as a muttam, which is again an old Kerala traditional element, which is like a veranda space where people can interact and have conversations, where your neighbors can come and sit and talk. So we actually got discarded laterite blocks from old buildings which were cut up, and then it was used to make the entire muttam. So even now it is so wonderful to see that, you know, there are so many informal sessions happening there also, and it's becoming like a very active space. And the plants caught on with the grills, and it is the entire facade became very different. Another material which we found, because when we were closely working on the project, is again something called as jute rolls, which is again a very cheap local material that you get. And once we found out it can be stretched really hard and put on the roof, it became like a translucent, screen through which the skylights could give the light. And at the same time, it became like a wonderful false ceiling option for the roof. And finally, you can see that, you know, with the roof and everything, it is able to again stay very submerged. All you're seeing is the roof when you're looking from outside. The entire building is, the residential area is able to be below, the art space is about able to be on top, and it all seemingly merges with the landscape. There is the field that is on the other side, and the house is on the left side. So like the ultimate point is that the design and materials like should not disrupt the cultural fabric of a place, and in some sense it can always accommodate the culture, the society, and transform into something that is really wonderful in terms of like adding again to the culture and vibe of a place. So I actually would like to share a video now of the hub and how it's being used. So just. Hello. Can you hear the sound? Hello. Is the audio
Yes,
is it
we can
audible?
hear the audio. Yes.
Oh.
Shri Kamal Sangeeta Rasikaya Shri Kamal Dika
Thank you, Oshin, for this very interesting presentation. And for those of you who wish to ask Oshin any questions or ask for any advice, we're now opening the Q&A session. So feel free to interact with us. And I'd also like to introduce you to Daniela Silva, our journalist from Architecture Hunter, who will be conducting the Q&A session.
Hello. Thank you, Oshin, for your inspiring presentation. I really enjoyed that. And it's always different to have, like, one thing is to see the pictures of a project, and another thing is to see or to hear the architect to present the project. So it's also a new perspective. Thank you for that. So to start the Q&A, to start the conversation, Oshin, I would like to ask you first a broad question, since at the beginning of your presentation, you said that it's very common for the office to be associated with this idea of breaking paradigms and disruptive design. So I would like to ask, since Wallmakers is known for its unconventional approaches, how do you define disruptive design, and what does breaking paradigms means to you in the context of architecture?
So one thing that I really feel when you're talking about disruptive design, it is basically, about innovating, things one by one. But one thing that people generally tend to, like kind of there's a misinterpretation about is you think that that invention kind of happens overnight. Like, I have this perfect project and I'm going to, do this and that, like I'm going to introduce a new element. But to be honest, the three things that I mentioned, like if you're going to consider the ecology of the site, second thing, the climate that you're working in, whether it's too hot, too cold, what you want to achieve. And the third thing is the people. And when I'm saying people, it need not always be the 3 or 4 people that you're talking about who is, paying you to make the project. So I'm talking about a broader sense. Whoever is part of that site, it can be the organisms, it can extend to the general people in that area. So you can see in the last project also, ultimately the project became much greater than, it became less about the 4 people who funded for it. And now you can see that entire house is like open for anyone who's a music enthusiast. So, when you talk about these 3 terms, and so along with it, there is the design, there is a material, there is the people who make it. All of these factors kind of come together. So the whole point is like, how can we design something that is like, to be honest, when we look at it, we feel that the conventional architecture is what is disrupting more than, whereas, when we keep all these factors in mind, what you're making ultimately becomes something that is, which ultimately has to merge in with all these 3, factors in that sense. And and mostly, like, rather than it being about one huge change, if you can see also, like, through the presentation, there is always a context, there's always a history where the pointers are picked from. It's about understanding maybe what went wrong. Can we do something better? It's like about,
Mhm.
changing one element at a time. And then finally putting it all together to, have one cohesive thing that is, finally, in fact, merging with whatever is there. I wouldn't want to say disruptive, but the whole process of it becomes something which you're questioning each and every element. Like why, why the veranda, like what is wrong with the old veranda system, how do we make it different? Like roof, why the roof, what is, like what is good about the
Mhm.
roof, bad of the roof, what can be changed, what can we add? So it's about, in some sense, questioning each and every element throughout the process, questioning the materiality of it, the function of it, and of course I mean, people who are going to be using it. Again, in a larger
Yeah.
context, every single organism that is going to be
Yes,
part.
not about the client, but the users.
Yeah. So when we say users, it's a much broader spectrum
Yeah.
than the client. When we use the word client, it immediately becomes limiting. Your
A
your
niche. Yeah.
yeah, correct. To the people who have financially funded the project in some sense. So that
Yeah.
is kind of how we gently design, and then finally the projects happen in such a manner.
That's really interesting. Now, talking about the different use of materials. I will not say innovative because it's not like a new material per se, but it's a new use for the material. Wallmakers is redefining what's possible with these available materials like mud.
Yeah.
My question would be, what do you think is the biggest misconception about working with waste and mud in contemporary architecture?
Yeah. So one thing that you can see, that there's a importance in all the dates that are mentioned between the projects. So the first project started in 2004 by architect Vinod Daniel. It is a, like, the initially the firm was mostly building with CACB, and somewhere when you understand, okay, like, am I going to be limited by this material? Like, like, I'm an expert
Mhm.
on this, so I build with this. No, the whole point of this entire process is to keep learning as and go. So actually the shutter debris wall is a material that is patented by us, and you can see that like throughout these projects there is a journey in which the material slowly evolved one step at a time to become finally what it is in Nisarga. And again, we are still working on it in some of our even bigger projects, campuses, so that it can again become like even in a much larger scale, so that it becomes cost effective, sustainable, all of these things again. So the whole point of when you're talking about material is to be consistent in your in your research, and to slowly keep working on it. It's never about perfecting a material and then I stop here. It's about again still understanding that there is always like few steps to go ahead, and keep
Mhm.
taking those steps one at a time. So instead of thinking that okay, like tomorrow there's a new material that is going to come that is going to solve all our problems, like it is more to do with what is there and how we can incorporate it, and then later to keep perfecting it depending. So even in that ledge project you can see that stone came entirely based on when excavation happened, and like there's so much of stone, like we don't want to just throw it somewhere. So how can
Mhm.
that become something that is there? And again, in such hilly areas, bringing material from somewhere else is always a hassle, which we never think about.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about embodied energy, it's always like advisable to use from what is there in that 5 mile radius, what is there in that, especially if you can take it from the site, well and good. So like when you're working with waste and materials, the whole point of it is not to think too much of it as waste, that
Mhm.
the work, just to think of it as another material. Like if there's a possibility to use it, then it can be incorporated in wonderful small large ways, and as a part of a construction.
Mhm. And looking at it not as a hassle that we have to rid of it, but to see the potential.
Yeah, because generally waste means like immediately the word ugly pops up in your head,
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
that
exactly.
like you're not able to get it out of your, these two have become synonyms in some sense. So the whole idea is to not think of it like, waste. It's like another material. So the whole point was like initially we like started out building with soil, and then we found out there is more waste available than soil. in a particular region, like, and sometimes not all soil is suitable for block construction. So that is when the idea came,
Okay.
okay, like, we have to build with what we have at hand rather than go searching for this, perfect sustainable material. So the
Mhm.
embodied energy of our shutter debris wall is even lesser than of our, mud walls, because it's able to reuse a waste material also as a part of construction.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you. Now, I
Yeah.
would like to start going through the questions that the audience has been putting, and some of them are really interesting. The first one is, so someone wrote, "Well done on all your wonderful work. How have you navigated any authority regulations or testing required around using these site manufactured materials, if any?" And this question for me is particularly interesting because, for example, the last project you showed, the
Yeah.
first thing that popped to my mind was, oh my God, I'm an architect. I'm based in Portugal, and the first thing I thought was, in Portugal, this would be impossible. Like, no one would regulate this kind of construction. But I mean, it's so beautiful, and you see the people using it.
Yeah. So two things. One is that, see, you can see that it took 7 long years to get the patent and the government. So, till then, it like the building, you can see initially it was part of, a small wall in a big building. The wall starts somewhere like that. And ultimately, because our material actually has got a compressive strength of 4.5 MPa, which is higher than what the normal fired bricks, which is currently being used for construction over here, gives. So, like, structurally, if it's able to take that kind of load, it's not a problem for us. Other than the regulations, for us, it's mostly to do with like leaving the setbacks, and we kind of like, even without the setbacks itself, we try maximum to do very less coverage of a site, so that certain areas of the site really grow without even manicured landscapes, so that it kind of happens. But other than that, the regulations are not I think where most of these projects are, like, which you have seen is being done, the regulations are mostly restricted to setbacks and coverages and building materials. It does not really dictate any other terms beyond that point. So which again, gives us the flexibility to creatively add in few elements, like, as like, if we are able to. So
Okay, thank you. Now,
yeah.
another question
But there is a
is,
proper lab testing. So somewhere, I think, because we are, there's a lot of work happening on site. Like, whenever a prototype is done, it's always sent back to a lab. There is always each and every one of these
okay, that
prototypes. I saw
connection.
there is a continuous, like, background lab work that happens to get this, and then you have to submit it. And so that kind of work always happens simultaneously, throughout these years. So
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Another question I have here is, I am one of your biggest fans, and our team has been following Vino Daniel for a long time. We've
yeah.
been practicing architecture for the past 10 years, and our architectural vocabulary aligns closely with yours, rooted in the constructivist and the approach that stays true to the nature of materials and form. What I would love to understand is how you developed such innovative construction techniques, while these techniques have been explored globally for years, executing them in real-world projects.
So again, I think it kind of overlaps with the answer that I gave
Yeah.
before. So see, you can see again, that is why the Sharjah project also I wanted to show, because see, the other two projects are based in Kerala, which is again, like a different, like, you can think of it like a different space and everything. So every place, any region will always have an history, like, if you like, go back, and more often than not, ultimately, now if you look at the urban landscape of anywhere around the world, the cities look pretty much the same. Like, I can put together, just give me a second, just hold on.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you look at, if you're taking like a typical urban picture, like around the world, it's slowly reaching to a phase where you cannot really distinguish, which country it is, which place it is just by looking at it. So in some sense, but there are always markers for any region, okay, where you can go back and study, and you can also see what you can pick from it, like why is probably the reason why certain things went out, and how we can modify those things. So in some sense, we have always like try to keep a blank slate when you're going to a new site, new context. Try not to take, whatever you have already learned from your previous site experience, and then to see fresh, like what is here, like what is the material here. So again, for Sharjah, there was a huge challenge because the sand was something that is like there's no clay content, and it was almost impossible, like nobody builds with that kind of sand, it's not been done. So but if
Yeah.
you think in another way, if you're always thinking, okay, how can I make blocks with it? So instead, when this tire thing came, it changed the entire picture. The tire masonry can take like 4 times the load of what our normally mud blocks can.
Yeah.
So it kind of opens up a doorway for lot of new things in that sense. And now, like once you're familiar with the tire, we are actually building even larger structures with tire in places like Chennai, where it's really hot, like in certain sites where we don't have any trees to protect, because we make it a
Oh.
point to make sure that our buildings are passively cooled. We do not want to depend on mechanical air conditioning to do that. So like this temperature has always been a huge, and like in the last few years you can see like around the world temperature is just rising, and it's very different. So like there is an entire segment of the practice that is now being like focusing so much on how do we passively achieve a good living condition inside the buildings.
That's fascinating. I'm
Yeah.
curious to see that new project. So another question is, someone is asking, could you please explain how you approach a project? Can you break down your design process and workflow? I imagine that each project is different. I don't know if you can pinpoint the
Yeah. So
main.
one thing in common is again, what like I said before, to start with a blank slate, just look at the site for what it is, and then the three factors that come in, like what is there on the site in terms of the existing ecology. Especially if you're building in a sensitive area, then we have to definitely look at the bigger picture. Okay, it's not just about your building, and second thing is to think about like all the stakeholders, like what are the requirements. And in some sense, the design is entirely a product of these three things that I said, nature, climate, people. And always there is a like room for like you can see even with all the projects that I said, there's always been a change that happened based on something that was on site, because we are like constantly on site. We are part of the building process. It's not like our job ends when we do the drawings, the design is done. The design is never done. It's always, the building is always being built. Like it's a continuous.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then we are like us, even the workers, whether it's somebody who's been with us before, a new team that we're working with, everyone is part of that process. So sometimes it's when you're working with them that some discussion happens, and you're like understanding, okay, there is certain a part of it which you never thought of before, but you're now seeing it because you're seeing how the seasons go on site. So when you're somebody who's sitting in an office, you don't understand what is happening there on site. So
Yeah.
when you're part of like a when your site becomes your office, you are aware of what is happening there, and that gives you a much better understanding of the material, the people you're working with, ultimately the ones who are building it, and like the small nuances. And we are always open to make that change in the design to always make it better. So a lot of things are actually added or sometimes subtracted depending on how the site conditions are. And like so the entire process of building becomes like a like yeah, to once you reach the output stage only, you kind of you can understand, okay, this is it, we are there. So it's a constant process, each of these projects. It's a study of its own material, its own design, continuously going.
And it's interesting that you refer the dialogue with the construction workers. because
Yeah.
they are also part of the
Correct,
process,
correct.
and they have the knowledge that sometimes we don't have
Sometimes they
that
do,
much.
sometimes they don't also. So that is what normally
Yeah.
happens, which is again lacking in, like generally lacking, which is what happens is when we don't know the craft, we are at the mercy of somebody who knows the craft, who says, okay, this is it. This is this is
Yeah.
what the material can do because they have been doing one particular way. So in general, if you look at traditional craftsmen, throughout the years, they generally perfect one technique. It's like we build like this. They can't change it left or right. And we as architects, we become at the mercy of, because we don't know about that technique. We are like,
Mhm.
okay, we have to take their word for the law. So it's a give and take process also. Sometimes, like once we learn, there are different applications that, which we can think of. But when they know that you know the material, they listen to you. When you say, okay, no, by like we'll do it like this, or we can do like this because, logically, this is possible. So everyone becomes a part of, sometimes it's them who point out things. Sometimes once we are in that zone where we understand the materials, we become the people who can teach them. So in the Sharjah Pavilion, we actually worked with an entire team of people. And only on the 40th day, we found out that they were not even construction workers. Like, they were just people who were like, I don't know, probably lorry drivers, goat herders and everything. And they had just, come in fresh, clean, like blank slate.
What
So
a
thankfully
surprise.
we found it only on the 40th day. So we weren't really, troubled. But then it is possible for an entire new team also to build that. So it was a huge learning
Amazing.
experience because, they had absolutely no idea of any construction.
Yeah,
And still,
I
we
can
could,
imagine the panic,
yeah, correct,
but
correct.
it's
So
also an
thankfully we knew only
experience.
last. So
Okay, thank you so much, Oshin. This has been such an inspiring conversation. We have so many more questions, but unfortunately, we ran out of time. Thank you
yeah.
so much again. Your work, it's very inspiring, and it's showing us how disruptive design can blend sustainability, community, and aesthetics. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for inviting, to be a part of this webinar thing also.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oshin, for your insightful answers and for joining us today. It was very, very nice to have you with us.